Today we are going to find the equation of a sine or cosine curve based on 2 points. So looking at the master equation, A affects the amplitude, which is how high or low a graph goes. B affects the period. C is your horizontal movement, which is right or left. And D is your vertical movement, up or down. And we need the A, B, C, and D to find the equation of the curve. So looking here at our first example, from this baseline, which is also called the principal axis, this graph goes up. If we're at -2, is the principal axis. We're going up 3, baseline, down 3. So in this case, our amplitude is 3, which is our A. We can see here, pi over 5 is where it begins. So we are shifting right pi over 5, and that's going to be our C term. For D, we're going to notice that D, it is shifted down 2. So the principal axis has gone down 2. And the last one, I saved the best for last, is B. So looking at this, hopefully I can identify this is one full period. And a period is how long it takes for the graph to start repeating itself. So in this case, we've given 2 points that are half the period. So if we find this distance here and then multiply it by 2, that will give us the full period. And then we'll be able to find our B term. So to find B, we're first going to subtract pi minus pi over 5. And that's going to give us this distance here. So we're going to find a LCD. Now remember, 4 pi over 5 is half the period. So we have to multiply by 2. 2 times 4 pi over 5 gives us 8 pi over 5. So this distance, now we know, is 8 pi over 5. So we're using now our equation. Period equals 2 pi over b. We've established the period is 8 pi over 5. This is a proportion, so we're going to cross multiply, and that's going to give us 5 times 2 pi is 10 pi, and 8 pi times b is 8 pi b. Hopefully you're noticing the pi's cancel. So 10 equals 8b. Dividing both sides by 8, b is 10/8, which simplifies to 5/4. So now we have found our b is 5/4. So plugging it into our equation, we have our amplitude is 3. What is this? B is 5/4. We are shifting right pi over 5, and we are going down 2 before we start the graph. Some teachers like you to simplify. Depends on your instructor. If you were to simplify, that's going to be pi over 4 minus 2. And both of these are correct. We're going to do a second example. Now in this case, just a quick review of cosine. It does something like this. Da, da, da. If it's a negative cosine, instead of starting at its highest point, it starts at its lowest point. And you can see here, that's exactly what's happening here. So we know that this is going to be ultimately negative. Now looking at this, finding our amplitude, we need to find half this distance. Half this distance tells us where our principal axis is, or where our vertical shift is, up or down. So if it's a distance of 4, because that's a -4, and this is a distance of 6, this entire thing is 10 long. So that means half of that is going to be 5. So if, noticing here, if we're at 1 and we go up 5, we're at 6. If we're at 1 and we go down 5, we're at -4. So we have established that our baseline or principal axis, which is our D term, is 1. And in this case, it is not sine. In this case, we are doing cosine. Now we're going to do our amplitude. And looking at this from the principal axis, notice if you're going up 5, down 5, your amplitude is going to be 5. This happens to be shifted left, -5 pi over 8. So notice when we plug that into the equation, it's going to become positive because it started as x minus c. And now we need to find our b term. Now, looking here, from here to here is half of a period. So we want to find the distance from this point to this point, and then we're going to multiply that by 2. So the distance from 5 pi over 8 plus pi over 8, notice we're adding because we're finding distance. So although this point is -5 pi over 8, this distance is 5 pi over 8, and this distance is pi over 8. So now we have 6 pi over 8, or simplified, 3 pi over 4. Now this is half of a period. So if we're going to multiply it by 2 to find the full period, and we're going to get 6 pi over 4, also known as 3 pi over 2, and that's our b. And now we're going to plug it into the final equation, and we are going to get remember, it is negative because it's starting at its lowest point for cosine. And we're going to get -5 cosine x. Now notice x minus -5/8 makes it x plus 5/8 plus 1. Some teachers accept this. Some want you to simplify it, which would mean you would want to distribute that into the parentheses. So you're going to get 3 pi over 2x plus 15 pi over 16 plus 1. And those are both equally correct. And that does that.